What's happening to K-pop? Idols in Korea are debuting younger and younger. Maybe you're thinking K-pop has always been an industry that debuted younger idols. And you'd be correct. K-pop has always been geared towards an idealized image of youth from boa to baby monster. Even successful past shows like 2015's Produce 101's main director, Han Dong-chul, said it was his intention to create wholesome pornography with the Survival series. For years, major Western publications and journalists have been painting K-pop fans as uniquely naive and K-pop as uniquely insidious. Every K-pop fan knows the sound of themselves groaning after seeing another poorly researched Western piece of clickbait.
Maybe what I really want is to be one of these Asian girls.
But what's changing now is the age floor dropping even further, with kids as young as 8 being thrown into these shows with adult-coded aesthetics and schedules. The difference isn't just age either. There's a new intensity, visibility, and a total lack of boundaries. What used to be rare or behind the scenes is now front and center, streaming everywhere and plastered all over social media. And now it's in a crop top too. Recent shows like Under 15 claim to spotlight rising stars. But when clips surfaced of an 8-year-old dressed in revealing stagewear, the internet erupted. Netizens were quick to hammer the show and its producers, calling for its cancellation. In recent years, the global music industry has faced a wave of accountability, as high-profile artists and executives, once seen as untouchable, have been charged and, in many cases, convicted of abuse and sexual crimes. But even as global industries reckon with their past, K-pop producers are fast-tracking the idol timeline, pushing children into the spotlight earlier than ever through highly curated survival shows. The marketing on some of these shows slickly describes them as prodigy hunting, as though it's in the vein of a traditional musical apprenticeship during the Romantic period. And some even have established idols like Daesung of Big Bang and Sandara of 21 involved in their production to lend them credibility. Producers often point to earlier idols like Boa, who debuted at just 13, as proof that starting young isn't new in K-pop. But the data backs the claims of critics and netizens that have been saying, in recent years, the average age of debuting idols has fallen further than ever, solidifying this trend not as an exception, but as a new industry standard, and the spotlight feels darker than ever. So, the K-pop machine runs on talent, discipline, and increasingly, the labor of minors. But what does that really mean for the ones becoming idols? It means, at an age where most kids are still figuring out fractions, some are signing contracts that will dictate their lives for the next 7 to 10 years. These contracts, sometimes called slave contracts, bind trainees to long-term agreements with minimal oversight. And unlike most child performers globally, K-pop trainees operate in a legal gray area, often without the protections that child actors or athletes are entitled to. In South Korea, the Labor Standards Act technically prohibits children under 15 from being employed, unless they receive a special permit. Entertainment companies routinely apply for these exemptions. The paperwork is in order. The protections are not. Many trainees live away from their families, under extreme scrutiny 24/7. Their development, emotionally, intellectually, socially, even physically, is secondary to their production value to their company. Success becomes a finish line they were forced to sprint toward barely after they learned how to walk. When childhood is a live stream, when every breath is reviewed, and where even idols like Everglow's Yeerin can dedicate 6 years of their life to K-pop and still not break even financially, you have to ask, what kind of dream is this? The system doesn't just expose minors to hardship, it conditions them to equate identity with output, guilt with rest, to see exhaustion as virtue and shame with any sign of struggle. It's not just pressure, it's grooming as a brand strategy, and we've all been cheering for it. This video isn't about tearing down K-pop. It's about asking hard questions about the system and its incentives. It's about caring enough to ask how we can protect the people who make K-pop possible. If we keep brushing it off as just how K-pop works, we're letting the worst parts of the system define what K-pop becomes.
I was out of control. I became insatiable.
So how did we get here, and why is it happening? And if famous idols from previous generations like Boa debuted at 13, why is the age floor collapsing now? There is no single answer to an industry-wide trend, and the forces driving this go deeper than any one producer or company. It's patterns, pressure, precedent, and a growing comfort with things that should still feel uncomfortable. They're woven into culture, economics, history, and into how we as fans respond. Behind every K-pop group are closed rooms and quiet meetings with quiet money that demands a return. Market algorithms and predicted yield over time trajectories that decide the lifespan of an artist or group before they even debut. Of the many reasons, one of the most compelling is longevity. The younger they debut, the longer they can remain active and profitable in the industry. Youth sells, and now companies are optimizing for it. Because the earlier they debut, the longer, statistically, they can profit. This trend is not even particular to K-pop. This is a trend worldwide. But South Korea takes it one step further with its Confucian heritage that has long emphasized a child's role in bringing honor to their family. That means success isn't just encouraged, it's expected. And in industries like K-pop, where visibility starts young, that pressure arrives early. It creates an intense competitive atmosphere to succeed early, visibly, and perfectly. In this context, youth represents more than just innocence. It signifies vitality and energy and the promise of what's still to come, qualities the industry is eager to mold and monetize. But structural pressures like Confucianism and corporate greed have been present in K-pop since the beginning. So why now are we watching this race to the bottom with the mean debut age dropping and the resultant backlash from groups like Baby Monster leaning into youth as their selling point? When idols like Tsuyu, Somi, and Jungkook and other currently famous idols have previously debuted young. In the 1990s, the Asian financial crisis struck South Korea hard. K-pop was just beginning to take shape as a genre. The industry was still figuring out how to package and promote its idols. But by the time idols like Wonyoung were born in 2004, the industry was no longer improvising. It was optimizing, and she would become one of its most polished outcomes. Because in K-pop, if you want a Wonyoung, you have to start young. Enter the idol training system. Modeled after Japan's teenage idol boom in the 1980s, K-pop emerged as something sharper, more controlled, a system where young performers were shaped in silence, allowed to reach perfection in private, and only then allowed into the light. Under this system, age became a metric of potential. And while some male idols have debuted young, the push for earlier debuts is a trend that overwhelmingly targets girl groups. Part of that is logistical. Female idols aren't subject to the military draft, making their careers more predictable. But it also ties into perception. Girls are often seen as maturing faster, more emotionally composed, more camera-ready at a younger age. But for everyone, more youth offers a longer runway. More years to train, more time to profit. And under that logic, companies began recruiting at younger and younger ages, sometimes as early as 10 or 11, before many have even left elementary school. Because traineeship isn't classified as formal labor, trainees fall through the cracks, and companies use that to avoid accountability. There's a cold efficiency to the system, and the success of idols like Wonyoung, Boa, and Taemin, all of whom debuted young, is often used to justify it. Debut early, train relentlessly, stay visible for as long as the system allows. The earlier you enter, the longer you last, until age catches up and the spotlight moves on. Age in K-pop cuts both ways.
Wow.
Just as youth is worshipped, older idols often find themselves struggling to stay relevant, grappling with a system that was designed to launch them, but not to sustain them. Their value is tied to freshness, not growth. And once that shine fades, so does the industry's interest. The curtain rises, falls, and rises again, always with someone new. What can fans even do when the system is so much bigger than any of us? What can we do to stop the music we love from becoming a modern-day musical Baal, devouring more and more from children who've already given everything? Just to be seen by an industry that sells dreams and delivers very little else. What happens when we dismiss the warning signs, the exhaustion, the anxiety, the collapse, the burnout behind the bright lights? What happens when we ask children to keep performing, even when they can't anymore? So the K-pop industry is driven by profit, and youth is one of its most valuable selling points. And that becomes a real crisis when policies fail to keep pace with the industry, when laws, oversight, and cultural norms don't evolve fast enough to meet the realities on the ground. realities where young idols are being commodified, spotlighted, and stretched past their limits. South Korea's Labor Standards Act sets the legal working age at 15. But as mentioned, entertainment companies routinely apply for minor permits to bypass that limit. These permits don't limit training hours. They don't guarantee any mental health support, and they don't protect against the real costs of starting young: exhaustion, disordered eating, injury, isolation, harassment, the uprooting of a self still trying to grow. Or simply put, they don't protect at all. What's worse, trainees are not even recognized as workers. They are not students, not employees, only investments. What's needed are solutions rooted in policy, derived from the lived experiences of those within the system. The recent cancellation of the under-15 K-pop audition show, following the criticism over the sexualization of minors, underscores both the urgency and possibility for change. These 6 proposals are informed by labor protections in other industries, expert recommendations, and the testimony of former idols. They aim to safeguard young artists without dulling the competitive edge that made K-pop a global phenomenon. Trainees currently exist in a legal gray area. By giving them formal recognition under labor law, their working hours, conditions, and protections could be regulated just like any other job. Limits would prevent minors from being overworked, overfilmed, or over-promoted before they're developmentally ready. This includes restrictions on how long they can rehearse, appear on camera, or participate in idol-related activities each day or week. Companies would be legally required to provide therapy access, ensure that minors continue their academic education, and guarantee regular breaks and rest days, especially during high-pressure periods like debuts or comeback seasons. External oversight would ensure that companies aren't policing themselves. Third-party ethics boards could evaluate contracts, training practices, and treatment of minors, and issue penalties or warnings. Trainees who want to leave should be able to do so without being sued, silenced, or shut out of the industry entirely. This protects their freedom and prevents abusive power dynamics from trapping kids in years-long contracts in hostile environments. This means reevaluating whether it's ever appropriate to debut idols under a certain age, and perhaps a complete blanket ban. Raising the age idols are allowed to perform on music shows, for instance, could act as a safeguard against premature commercialization for everyone. If you're an international fan, remember K-pop is a global enterprise, and global fans aren't just bystanders, you're stakeholders. The numbers don't lie. Over 60% of album revenue comes from outside Korea. Fans around the world helped raise K-pop to where it is today. They can help raise its standards too. K-pop's greatest strength has always been its ability to evolve. It's an industry that reinvented itself from crisis, rose from obscurity, and reached every corner of the globe, not by standing still, but by adapting. And that evolution can include giving idols safety, dignity, and the space to find their own rhythm. All we need is the will to change.